Hey Global Village, what's up? Okay, I want to talk about the Russia-Ukraine war, and this is, I guess, part two of the original video I made a few days ago. And I think I'll just make the point before I kick on with this that this is a very difficult subject for me to discuss because, in some sense, it feels quite personal in as much as my thoughts on this conflict have evolved because of my engagement with another community who is primarily focused on the genocide happening in Palestine. And as I think I previously alluded to in that video, it was immediately clear to me that most people who are supportive of the people of Palestine believe quite strongly that Ukraine is the bad guy in this equation, and by extension, what they're really saying is that American imperialism and NATO, which they see primarily as an American weapon, is responsible for the conflict happening in Ukraine. So this particular community, which I've really enjoyed being a part of because it has been quite, I guess the word is comforting to be around people who are capable of feeling genuine and real empathy and outrage for the horrors that are happening to civilians who have absolutely no control over what's been happening to them, seemingly at the hands of the Zionist entity that has completely dehumanized these people. So yeah, it's been good to be able to realize that there are people capable of feeling empathy and care. But there is a problem. And the problem is that when it gets right down to it, I am not driven by a single ideology. And what I mean by that is I'm not a capitalist, I'm not a communist, I'm not a socialist. I mean, I'm a humanist. I care about people. That is what matters to me the most. And when you start to talk about these other sort of systems of governance, and how for many people it is kind of central to their identity, they choose very clear battle lines about who they think is right, or perhaps more to the point, who they believe is wrong. And by implication, everything that they say and everything that they focus on is driven by that ideology. I'm not like that. First of all, I think to properly understand things like capitalism, socialism, communism, and how that draws ideological battle lines between different countries and nations is breathtakingly complicated. I think, you would need a degree in probably more than one subject to really be able to speak confidently to how these things intersect with, major global conflicts, etc., and by implication, who you choose to think is right or wrong. I will actually mention that there was another channel I was watching that focuses on the concept of game theory. And one of the very interesting things about that particular channel is that, again, they don't really pick a side. Like, to believe in game theory is almost to believe that every side is amoral or immoral, and that they're just guided by basic principles of self-interest, and that you need to take those principles of self-interest into consideration when understanding how everyone behaves. Again, so that's another thing. And I don't really exist entirely in that world everywhere either, because morality does matter to me. As I said, I'm a humanist, so the morality of treating people like humans and like equals does matter, and so perhaps that is the lens upon which I look at things. Now, that's going to bring me back to what is happening with Ukraine and Russia. And so I'm going to talk about how I kind of originally came into this and sort of how it informed my own bias and my own opinions. So back in the day, I remember watching a documentary series by Oliver Stone, and he had the opportunity to interview Vladimir Putin. I think it was just called the Putin interviews. So it was a one-on-one, and he made it into kind of a documentary series. And it was deeply fascinating. And at that point, I was very much in alignment with what Oliver Stone was talking about. Because again, he painted America, and I think quite rightly so, as the imperialistic power that had interfered with so many nations, whether it be in the Middle East, whether it be in Europe. There's not a pie that America hasn't dipped its finger into and tried to engage with and manipulate and control to its own particular goals and ends. And so I certainly don't disagree with that in any shape or form. So anyway, when I watched that series, I was like, Putin, he's obviously highly intelligent. He obviously has clear and obvious grievances with the West, and he was articulating them quite clearly. So I was very much in the Putin court at that point. However, I looked at a lot of other information about Vladimir Putin that isn't so flattering. Now, anyone who sees America as the great Satan is immediately going to claim any negative information about Putin is propaganda. It's just someone being brainwashed by Western media. But I don't agree with that at all. There are objective facts about Putin, about how he came to power, about he controls power, which simply cannot be denied if you want to have an actual rational and objective discussion about who he is and how he governs his country. This is not going into bat for the West, because as I've said, the rhetoric I've just provided here, that is not my intention. My intention is to be honest about who Putin is. And what are my conclusions of that? Well, he is a classic authoritarian dictator. He's not something else. The last elections that he ran were a complete joke. He had all his competition standing up on stage with him, celebrating, hugging, cheering him on as they had just lost, which is absurd. This is not how political opposition parties actually behave. What they actually do is, upon defeat, they address their constituents. They explain to them why they lost, what they will do to perform better next time, and then they will offer a begrudging congratulation to their opposition. This is how it would work in a normal democracy. And by the way, Putin's only real competition found himself in a Siberian prison where he very suspiciously suffered a heart attack and died. And we all know how people in Russia who tend to oppose Putin have fallen out of windows, died in plane crashes, found themselves locked up in prison. I mean, it's kind of almost farcical at this point. You can't deny these things are happening. It is not a democracy in Russia in any shape or form. Now, is Putin a good guy? Is he actually doing this for the benefit of the Russian people? I tend not to think so. It looks to me like he has pilfered enormous amount of funds to enrich himself, as Navalny actually pointed out in a documentary he made about the billion-dollar palatial palace that he built for himself. So, and also we all know about the Russian oligarchs. These oligarchs do exist. They are ostensibly crime families. Again, to me, these are just objective facts of the matter, and you can't just ignore them because they are inconvenient to your particular ideology. So, anyway, I will go ahead and I will just talk about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and how I actually see it playing out right now, because I do believe that while Putin is a authoritarian dictator and he does actually have imperialistic goals, it doesn't mean the arguments against what is happening, what the Ukraine are doing, are invalid. And so I will present them because I think they make a lot of sense. So the first one is that America is waging a war against Russia by proxy. And I think there's a rather cynical saying that goes something along the lines of America is willing to fight Russia right down to the last Ukrainian. And, there is a lot of truth to that. Now, we do have to ask, what about Zelensky? Is he purely a puppet, a pro-Western puppet, or is there a little bit more to it than that? Well, I think you can argue that to a degree he is a puppet, but I still think he also is has a degree of self-determination here, and I think you can clearly see that with the debates and trouble he has had with Trump. They had a really significant confrontation in the White House, which the whole world was free to see. That is not what you would call a puppet. So Zelensky is playing his own independent part in this situation as well. Now, does Zelensky believe he can win this war? I don't know. I'm not inside Zelensky's head. But one possibility is that maybe he does think he can ultimately come out the hero. And maybe he thinks he can somehow turn this around. And how could he think that could happen? Because obviously Ukraine is losing ground every day. So it's looking worse and worse for them as each day goes by. Well, I think maybe he hopes that as things get worse and worse, he will start receiving more support from America, and he will start receiving more support from NATO, and it may even ultimately come in the terms of boots on the ground. I think before that happens, they may lose many, many more soldiers. I think currently they've lost something like 1 million soldiers, which is absolutely horrific. And I think Russia has lost something similar in terms of when that war started. So for both countries, it's quite disastrous in terms of the human toll, the amount of people that have been killed. But maybe that's what he thinks. What does that say about Zelensky? Well, it says to me that he's putting his own, perhaps, ambitions ahead of the Ukrainian people. I think that if he cared about Ukrainians and about saving lives, he would actually be willing to go into negotiation with Putin, even if it means making serious concessions. Now, I don't know what Putin would see as acceptable in those negotiations. It may be that he expects almost total victory. So in that scenario, there possibly is no negotiations possible, but I doubt that's the case. Anyway, I guess how I'll close out on this is that it is hard, and talking about this is really hard because I feel like I have no real friends. I don't feel like people on either side of the equation are able to particularly align with my perspective because I'm my own person and because I want to create a truly objective understanding of what's happening. And I think with Russia and Ukraine, there are no good guys here. Again, if I strongly believed in communism and I despised capitalism in every sense of the word, then maybe I would feel strongly inclined to align myself more with with Russia. And although I don't think Russia is a communist nation, I think if you break it down, there's very little about Russia that is actually communist. So what can I say? I'm on a journey. I'm going to continue to speak my truth. I will continue to evolve my view as I go on, and I will continue to do so unapologetically, even if it makes me feel at times very isolated and alone. All right, Bendy out.